Welcome in. Today I have a fun guest who has a brand new book out, which we will speak about in just a few minutes. But right now, let me introduce Illena Douglas. Illena, thanks so much for spending some time.
Thank you. My pleasure.
What I want to talk about first is let's introduce you to the viewers, because a lot of times people hear your name and they see you, but they don't put the two together. So let's try. You have been an author.
Yes.
An actor, comedian, a producer. Your grandfather was legendary Melvin Douglas, which I know everybody has heard of. And now you have a book out, but let's first delve into a little bit of your history, because I first became aware of you in, 1996 in Wedding Bell Blues. I love that movie.
Thank you. Yeah, I enjoyed that little independent film. Should be a sequel. It's about, for those of you who haven't seen it, it's about three girls who are turning 30 and they go to Las Vegas. They're going to marry the first person they meet. And it was interesting at the time, Paulina Porizkova, she was the only one who was actually married. And the three of us have sort of stayed friends, and we always thought it would be interesting. Our lives really went so many different ways, so many different avenues, that we thought it would be interesting to meet up 30 years later in a film and be doing the same thing. Maybe we go to Vegas for a divorce or something. I don't know.
That'd be interesting. another, I don't want to say obscure, but another movie that might not have been on everybody's radar is Picture Perfect from '97 with Jennifer Aniston. And that was an adorable movie.
Yeah, another wonderful time I had working with the director there, Glenn Gordon Caron, and he and I, who created the show Moonlighting, and he and I stayed in touch. In fact, he used to live in Connecticut. That's what's great about movies. It's there, you sort of create a little micro family, and the good ones you sort of stay in touch. And it was interesting. Jennifer, she was the star of a movie called She's Funny That Way with Peter Bogdanovich, and we were in separate parts of the movie, but I hadn't seen her in many years, and when we saw each other at the premiere, so she was so sweet. Liliana, we had a lot of fun on Picture Perfect.
It's funny because I could see you in either role. I think you would have had the Aniston role would have been perfect for you as well.
Well, Glenn Gordon Caron was so funny because I'm a movie nut, and he sold me on, because originally I wasn't so keen on doing the movie. I had Grace of My Heart out, but he kind of convinced me, which I don't know why I believed him, but he said, it's sort of like fortune cookie and you're the Walter Matthau part. So that's what he sold me on. But we had a lot of fun doing the movie. Jay Moore also is in the film, who I later worked with on action. So I have many happy memories of shooting the film in New York City, which was crazy, in Times Square. I can't even imagine somebody doing that now. I have a picture of me and Glenn in the center of Times Square, shooting a scene with people behind the barricades. And I said, this is like my total fantasy of wanting to be in the movies.
Oh, well, that's what people imagine when they think about you filming on location. Now we did speak a little bit about your grandfather, Melvin Douglas. Was he the impetus that got you involved in acting, or you did not leave? Now let's go back a minute. You did not lead the typical Hollywood lifestyle.
No, not at all. I mean, I grew up here in Connecticut, but I spent a lot of time in New York, spending time with both of my grandparents in Queens, New York, and then my grandfather in the Upper West Side of Manhattan. So I felt a little bit like a New York kid, and then coming back to Connecticut was always very jarring because I always wanted to live in New York. You know, that was my dream, was just to live in New York City and do movies and theater. But I didn't exactly know how I was going to do that. But I think that obviously because of who my grandfather was, and we had such a close relationship, he was always encouraging me. When I was a child, I write him little letters and draw pictures and things like that. And I think that, you know, in my first book, which was called I Blame Dennis Hopper, what I sort of pieced together for myself was as a way to enter the conversation and be talking with him about the same things he was talking about. I think that I may have secretly dreamed of being an actress, but I think that I really wanted to be an actor, you know, because it would give me something to talk about with him. And so when he, you know, he mentioned, oh, you have to go on the theater and you have to be in the stage. So immediately I looked around and found, you know, the only theater in Connecticut was, you know, musicals and things like that, but it was still theater. And it was just trying to get some street cred, you know, to have him to talk about. But I always vacillated between being an actor and loving acting, but I also liked writing. I also thought about being a director. So and then my acting career kind of took off. So I didn't really think about writing anymore.
But you did write, and your new book. That's why we're here. Connecticut in the Movies. It's fascinating. I haven't been able to get through every little thing because you have so much detail about not only the towns, but the actors and the storylines in each story. Now, when I think of Connecticut, I think a lot of people are going to agree with me. Mystic Pizza, obviously. And when I went there, I had to get my Little Slice of Heaven T-shirt, but it is now gone to the wayside. But I'd never heard of Mystic before. I know it's a famous seaport, but that just really opened my eyes to all the beauty of the seaport areas of Connecticut. And then when we did finally take our New England tour, I said, we have to go to Mystic because it looks so beautiful, even though the story is not completely all that uplifting at all times. But I think you opened up it opened up a lot of eyes to the city. But also, you also think of Christmas in Connecticut. It's another one. Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court. Connecticut, as you say in here, has played a big role in movies.
Yes.
And why did you decide to write this book? And it's an amazing book. It's very heavy. Why did you decide to write this? And I know it's your home and you feel so comfortable there, but why did you want to bring all the ins and outs, the dirty little secrets? And you know, it's from the silent age. Connecticut has been part of movies. So tell us all about your experience writing.
Well, I've always, you know, in my writing about movies, I'm not a film scholar, you know, but I'm a film buff, and I always like to shine a light on films that people maybe haven't thought of or haven't seen, or look at them in a different light. And I always thought that Connecticut was really massively underrepresented as a place where so many movies have come out of, and it's never been really acknowledged, you know, going back to the silent era. And I thought if I could make one book that really is a statement of, here's, you know, 100 films that really talk about the perception of Connecticut, how it was created by Hollywood, how sometimes they got it right, sometimes they got it wrong, but then also how the culture influenced America, especially in a movie like Christmas in Connecticut. Mr. Blandings builds his dream house. And I wanted to tie that firmly back to the state and give the state an identity that I feel is lacking. And you can't you couldn't write a book, Ohio in the movies. You just can't. Connecticut has so many genres of film. I mean, that's why I wanted to make the book, is kind of to prove my point, is true crime, horror movies, country living comedies, Christmas movies, Hallmark movies, dark suburbia movies, idyllic suburbia movies, the home of Eugene O'Neill. I was talking to somebody in Chicago, and they never. I said it always frustrates me a little bit that people do think of Eugene O'Neill, our greatest playwright, but they don't tie him to New London, Connecticut, which is where he grew up and which is what he wrote about. Wilderness and Long Day's Journey into Night are both the light and the dark. They're the perfect example of what Connecticut is. He writes about his idyllic youth over a 4th of July weekend in New London, when it was a huge city. Steamboats were coming in, and beautiful hotels, and the Pequot Hotel, and all sorts of dignitaries. And then the fall of New London, which was, the hotels burned down. People who had bought these big mansions and country houses, like his father, who they built Monte Cristo, these big Victorian cottages. People left them, and so the decline of New London and that malaise permeates Long Day's Journey into Night. And yet, when people do Long Day's Journey into Night, you see an interior house, and it's really concentrated on the character, but nobody talks about that is New London. That's the spirit of New London. And I want to give New London a sense of energy, that it's not just a tourist stop, like you said, mystic. I want people who live in the state to embrace all these natural resources that they have. They should be standing front and center, proud, and claiming Eugene O'Neill, as their native son. He was living and working in Ridgefield, Connecticut. And, again, I figured if I put all of these little facts into one big book, it becomes a blueprint, as opposed to what I always found myself saying is, she's from Connecticut, or, if I put it all in one big book, we'll finally get the credit we deserve.
Katharine Hepburn, you mentioned her. She's a native Canadian. Not Connecticut. How do you say it? Connecticut? What's the right phrase?
I guess it's a Connecticut or a nutmegger, although that one seems.
I can never figure it out. She is native Canadian, Connecticut.
Yeah, she was born in Hartford.
Yeah, it
really, as I write about in the book, it is really she is the ambassador of the Connecticut brand.
Right.
In all movies, when you see a rich heiress, she's basically modeled after Katharine Hepburn. People do the voice, the look, the embodiment of Katharine Hepburn, that she wears pants, that she's independent, that her hair is a little bit unruly, that she loves nature, that she doesn't mind, she can dress up, but she doesn't mind getting her hands dirty. Well, those are all of the qualities that I think of in women that I admire who live in Connecticut, if that makes sense. There is a real identity here that has been expressed through the people on the screen, specifically Katharine Hepburn, and then also Rosalind Russell, too. I think she was from Waterbury.
Yes, definitely. And you did mention Hallmark, because Hallmark has produced a lot of movies in Connecticut. Mm-hmm. Another thing that I haven't mentioned, Yale is in Connecticut. A lot of shows do take place on the campus there, or the students are going to Yale, whether or not they actually film there. Yale is a big part of the state. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in I Love Lucy, Lucy and Ricky Ricardo moved to the farmhouse in Connecticut.
Yes, they did. They went to Westport. So again, it's a signature in films of affluence, getting out of the rat race. its proximity to New York makes it a getaway, but in movies, there's a big difference between someone who lives in New Rochelle, like they do in Dick Van Dyke, versus Westport. And it also has something to do with, Lucy and Ricky being actors and artists. And just as we have little enclaves, in New York, it's Greenwich Village, Connecticut has that identity too. So many actors have chosen to live in Connecticut because of its proximity to New York and theater and films, but yet they want to live away from the city and they want to get back to nature. And one of the things that I wrote about in the book is it's a place that people really choose to live. And I found myself during COVID doing that too. It was an organic process of writing about Connecticut. And as I was writing and seeing how many people, Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward, obviously Katharine Hepburn, and, this idea that you could live away from the city, which I think as a performer, you always feel you have to be near a telephone in the city, ready to drop everything and, get on a plane and go get a job. And so choosing to live away from the city is a personal choice. And once you make that choice, which I now have done, and there's this long legacy of other, I was writing about Richard Widmark, being frustrated with Hollywood and leaving Hollywood. And he and his wife were writers, and so they moved to Connecticut and he became a gentleman farmer. And then, people wanted him to do movies, and he really didn't want to leave his farm. He became so entrenched in being a gentleman farmer. And you hear that story kind of again and again and again. And one of the great things, now I'm the ambassador for Connecticut, about living in the country is coming home. When I go away on a trip, there's a great sense of, I live in the country. It's a nice feeling to not be living in the city 24/7.
Well, that brought up, in the last month, I have seen Holiday Inn twice. And, and that's Bing Crosby's escape from the city is his farm in Connecticut. And that to me says it all. That basically says exactly what you were just saying.
Exactly. The theme of that movie is, again, he's his partner, Fred Astaire, and they have kind of a falling out and their career's not going well. So he decides he's going to move to Connecticut and, open a farm, a nightclub, which is so funny, only open on holidays. But what was interesting about that film, and also Christmas in Connecticut, is it created this idealized version where, even though it's the 1940s, people arrive in a sleigh. It's always snowing out, and there's these gigantic fireplaces, and he writes, White Christmas. He couldn't have done that in New York. And so those were all those threads that I wanted to pull together. He couldn't write that song in New York. He had to come to Connecticut. He had a transformational experience. He found out what his real values are. And so even though these are just fun Hollywood movies, there is a theme here that there's a better way to live, if that makes sense, away from the bright, shiny lights.
Well, in doing the research for this, apparently Mr. Blandings built his dream house is what you were experiencing at the present time. Is that correct?
Yes, at 24/7. I'm the project, which began 2.5 years ago. I'm on about stage 3, so I'm still dealing full time with masons and contractors of looking at tile and all of that. So I'm on phase 3. It's a rather large farmhouse, but yes, my house in California sold very, very quickly. I kind of just let destiny take over I was writing about Connecticut. I knew it was going to be a book. And I was sort of thinking, looking at Zillow, thinking, nice farmhouse in the country. And my neighbor came across the street. She said, "You're not thinking of selling your house, are you? Because we want to buy it." That's so it didn't even go on the market. It was sold. And then I just said, well, I guess I'm moving to Connecticut. And a house became available that I had actually known that, I would played in as a child. So it just seemed a little bit like kismet. And so that's the first picture in the book is actually me on the property with my ponies when I
With
was
your
a kid.
horse, yes, yes. So also that gives a good introduction into your history of the state. While doing this, I mean, there's a lot of information here. Like I said originally about this, the homes themselves,
Yes.
where they are and what they've gone through the years, the actors, the towns, the stories of the films themselves. What did you find was your biggest surprise while doing all this research? I mean, because there's a lot of research you did for this book. It must have taken you, I don't know how long, but there's a lot of research that went into it.
Well, the book, it's interesting. If anyone is going through a home renovation, I recommend writing a book because it was a great coping mechanism to just go in my office and put on headphones and just type away. But I get, the biggest surprise, it may sound obvious, was that my theories were actually correct. Was that there was this idea of this transformational place where actor after actor after actor, starting from the 1920s, that Noel Coward came here and to write, Scott Fitzgerald, Arthur Miller. I think it sounds like a little thing, but Marilyn Monroe and Arthur Miller he asked her to marry him in Connecticut. You're talking about one of the most significant personalities, actresses of the 20th century. She is an iconic figure. And she meets Arthur Miller. This is what I was writing about. She meets Arthur Miller and she comes to Connecticut, and suddenly her whole manner, even of dressing, changes. She's wearing a simple skirt and a cotton shirt, and there's pictures of her and she's radiant, and she's on his farm and they get married. And had she just stayed here, and she maybe would have been happier, but she found that kind of happiness here in Connecticut. And then again, that's when I knew, I said, I have to include that as a tidbit because it's what I'm talking about. Actors and actresses come here to feel that they get out of, the rat race. But what also surprised me was that after the movie The Stepford Wives, which is the same theme, they leave the city, but now it's, for nefarious reasons, he's going to turn her into a robot. And after The Stepford Wives, we now get a series of movies where everybody who comes to Connecticut, it's sort of a signal that something really bad is going to happen. And from the Stepford Wives till now, there is that mainly the feeling of, and that kind of surprised me. And I wanted to get, tip the scales a little bit back to our original origins of of a place that's idyllic. I mean, when the ice storm opens, you go, okay, this is going to be really bad. And usually Connecticut now is depicted as what I call dark suburbia. And that was the other thing that surprised me too, was that there should be taken seriously an entire genre of films which are about dark suburbia, which now in the modern context, do we even have suburbia? But yet it was so much a part of the American culture, to buy a dream house, to live in suburbia. And then all the films past the 40s and 50s and 60s, suburbia is depicted as a horrible place, a very dark place. And I wanted people to talk about that and kind of change that thought, because I think it's incorrect. I don't think suburbia was as horrible as they're depicting it in current days,
I agree. I don't think so. Connecticut, from all this and what I've seen and all those, it seems like the perfect getaway. It's close. You can be close to the city, yet you can be far away, all cozy, comfy with your little fireplace. Everything. To me, Connecticut, when I think of Connecticut, besides Mystic Pizza and the insurance companies, Hartford and all those things, I think it's like a Christmas card.
Yes, Courier knives.
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
it has that quality. And so that's what Hollywood did. Well, they had to shift it. Something that perfect, it can't be that perfect. So then that's when you started to get, that's the Stepford Wives. That's the whole, theme. And the idea of the Stepford Wives, which is so interesting, I write about this, is what they were trying to write about was conformity, was that Connecticut is a place where if you don't conform to the rules of society, and yet the movie is really not that about that at all. It's a completely sort of weird sexist take, and it presents a very repressive environment of Connecticut, and which I think is not correct and not accurate. And yet, just as in the early days, it was Holiday Inn and Christmas in Connecticut and everybody arrives in a sleigh, now Connecticut people are perceived as dark, repressive, wanting to conform. And I also wanted to kind of crack that myth a little bit.
Well, you have, and unfortunately we're out of time, but I do want to let everyone know that Connecticut in the movies, like I said, it's heavy, but it is so full and powerful. And you have done your due diligence as far as getting all the information together. It is a one-stop shop place for anything having to do with the state, whether it's filmed on location or in the backlot of a studio here. It all conforms to what Connecticut is. And I appreciate you spending the time here with us today to explain the book and your career and Connecticut itself.
Thank you. Well, I hope everyone gets it's a great Christmas present, because you can learn about the state, and you can take your own, hopefully you can take your own road trip through the state,
Yes.
Which would be my greatest hope.
I think anybody that sees a movie that is set in the state where they're from automatically feels close to that. But yet, and that's where you feel with Connecticut. And I think we all will get a greater appreciation of the state from your book.
Exactly. I hope so. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And for the viewers, I will see you next time when we take another look beyond the red carpet. Thanks for watching.
With over 30 years of experience in real estate and the mortgage industry, Darlene Mays provides knowledge and expert guidance to clients looking to buy or sell a home. Serving clients throughout South Orange County, Darlene specializes in the senior community of Laguna Woods Village. Darlene works with her clients to ensure the highest level of service, from the beginning of the process right down to the closing table. If you are looking to buy or sell, who you work with really does matter. Call Darlene Mays today.